Hello and welcome back. So in the last lesson we bootstrapped the CDK and we're now ready to write our first CDK application. I thought I'd just draw your attention to this web page. If you Google AWS Cloud Development Kit, you'll see this "What is the AWS CDK?" which contains a very nice picture which explains what's going on. We're going to write a CDK application, and we get to choose from a number of languages. We're going to write in TypeScript, and our application will simply consist of a number of what's called stack objects. In fact, our application is just going to have a single stack, and the stack object will in turn construct a number of AWS resources. Our first application will construct just a single resource, which will be an Amazon S3 bucket. So this is about as simple as you can get. Now you might be forgiven for thinking that when you run this app, it'll create a stack and the stack will create a bucket, but none of that is actually the case. Instead, when you run this app, all that will happen is it will create this file called a CloudFormation template file, which will sit on your local hard disk. But the file will define the stack and define the bucket within it. And then all that's required is you run the CDK command line application, which we installed as part of the setup for this course. So we run cdk deploy, and the cdk deploy command will read this file and read the instructions inside it, which are clearly to create a stack, which in turn constructs a bucket. And the cdk deploy command will follow those instructions, and it will ensure that the stack and the bucket are actually created in our AWS account. So with that, let's get on and do it. So here's our mono repo, pretty much as we left it at the end of our earlier lesson. However, I've added a bootstrap down command and some scripts to do that too. So for this lesson, we're going to create a new folder called CDK, which is going to contain that CDK application. And I'll put that in a source folder. And the source code will actually be split between two folders. One will be called bin, which will contain the CDK application. And the other folder will be called lib, which will contain the stack code. So the CDK application itself is remarkably simple. I'll just copy it in here. You can see, not counting the imports, there's just a couple of lines of code. It instantiates a CDK application and then it creates a stack object. In the lib folder will be the source code for the stack object. So let's just paste that in. And we can see that there is a single class with a constructor function, and the constructor function creates this bucket. So the bucket has a few parameters. The name of the bucket is going to start with CloudFront website bucket. It'll actually add some numbers to this to make it unique, and some options which essentially say, if you delete the stack, please delete the bucket and all its contents too. Now we've imported some npm libraries up here, so we need to get those installed, and to do that we'll use package.json. So let me just copy that in too. Now for now, just ignore these script commands, we'll come back to them. The focus right here is on these two libraries here. So to install them I need to run the pnpm install command, but that command alone will not find this package.json unless its container folder, the CDK folder, is listed in the pnpm workspace. So I will add that in like this, and now when I run pnpm, it will look in both of these folders for package.json files. It will find this package.json file and hopefully install these two. So let's go ahead and run it. You'll see there's going to be a small hiccup where it says pnpm approved builds must be run. So let's just run that. This is a one-off security process which has been added to pnpm, and I'll simply say it's okay to build using ESBuild. Do you approve? Yes. And we'll see that now the pnpm workspace file has got this allow esbuild to be used. Okay, so with that we can now have a node modules folder, and we have installed packages here. So we're almost good to go. Just a couple of other things we need to do. One is to add a tsconfig file, because this is a TypeScript program we're going to run. So I'll put that into the root of the CDK folder. And we also need a cdk.json file, which is just a CDK configuration, and I've pretty much minimized that. I've just got a single option to switch notices off. The tsconfig contains some pretty standard settings here, nothing particularly frightening there. And with that, we are now good to run our application. So to run it, I'm going to use this command here, cdk synth. So this means synthesize the CloudFormation template file. To do that, you need to run tsx and then cloudfront.ts, which, just a reminder, is this cloudfront.ts here. Now our cloudfront.ts just contains a single stack called CloudFront website, but conceivably there could be lots of stacks, and so the cdk synth command lists the stacks we want created. So we're just saying here, I just want the one, the CloudFront website stack. Now the synth command is going to need to run this CloudFront program, and to do that it's going to use the tsx command. TSX is a little bit like Node, but where Node runs a JavaScript program, TSX will run a TypeScript program. So our CDK synth command is going to run TSX, which will run our CloudFront program, and that will generate the CloudFormation template file narrowed down to just this one particular stack. So let's go ahead and run it. In order to do that, I'm going to add some items into my root package.json. So let's just put that over here. So cdk synth in the root is going to run pnpm-c change directory to the cdk folder, and then run cdk synth there. cdk synth is then going to run this cdk synth command, which in turn will run the TSX program, which will in turn run our CloudFront program. So that should end up with generating the files we require. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll use my alias prun, say prun cdk : synth. And that's run. And in fact, it prints out pretty much the contents of the CloudFormation template. As you can see, it's pretty complex. In the olden days, we used to write these templates manually. The CDK has certainly simplified that. And all the data has been stored in this cdk.out folder. And we can now ask the CDK to do a deployment based on this cdk.out file. So let me just show you. I've got a cdk deploy from cdk.out, which runs cdk deploy from cdk.out up here, and cdk deploy from cdk.out runs cdk deploy. It names the stack that's required and says no approval is required, and it's saying that you can find the data in the cdk.out folder, which of course is up here. So let's go ahead and do that. Here again is the root, so I'll say prun, and I'll just copy this in. Now, while that's running, I'll just bring to your attention that these two commands, the synth and the deploy, let's show you up here. The synth and the deploy, we've done this in two stages. We synthesized the cdk.out program. We synthesized the cdk.out data files, and then we deployed them. This can all be combined into a single command, which is here, cdk deploy, the name of the stack, requires approval never, and then it tells it to run this CloudFront file. So very similar to the synth command. In fact, the only thing that changes is the require approval, and synth becomes deploy. And this will do the whole thing in one go. But for now, I've done it in 2 stages, and it looks like it's run successfully. So let's go back to Chrome and go to the console home. And if we visit CloudFormation, I'll visit it this way, we can see that there's a new stack has been created called CloudFront Website. And this stack has created some resources, including this S3 bucket. So if we go back to console home and visit S3, we can see the buckets that exist. The first 2 buckets were created as part of the bootstrap process, but this bucket is the bucket that's been created by our CDK application. You can see it's called CloudFront Website bucket, and at present it's empty. So with that, let me just show you how all of this can be done in a single command. So I'm actually going to delete these 2 commands, and I'm going to delete these 2 commands. And it's quite instructive to simply run deploy, and you'll see that if I run cdk deploy from the root, that's going to run cdk deploy in the cdk folder, which is going to run the actual cdk deploy command. So bearing in mind that this is already deployed, if I run this, it will synthesize. Synthesis means generate the cdk.out file. So it does that again. But now when it's asked to deploy what's in the cdk.out file, it says no changes. There's really nothing to do. And it just says that the stack is already deployed. And as you can see, the entire time took 0.42 seconds. So half a second to read this cdk.out file and discover that it's not asking for anything new. Okay, so I'm going to bring this lesson to a close here, and in the next lesson we'll see how to destroy the stack as well as tidy up all of this source code.